Hi, everybody. This is Maya Zahira with PsychicProtectionSanctuary.com. And I'm finally back with another Ask Maya segment. This is where I answer one of our wonderful subscribers' questions. And first of all, I want to thank you for your patience because I think this question was posted like a month ago, but it has been very busy. A very busy time. And the reality, so I'm just going to start with a little announcement here. The reality is that the students in my Spiritual Empowerment Academy, my paid program, they are top priority. I spend time almost every day supporting them and answering their questions. But you guys on YouTube, you're also really important to me. You're next on the list underneath the members of the Academy. So that's just the reality. That's how it is. And so I want to thank you for your patience. This question was posted about a month ago. And unfortunately, I don't remember who submitted this question. But it is a great question. And I know everyone's going to be interested. So I think this was posted in response to over a month and a half ago, I was talking a lot about false light because I had just published my newest book, Revealing the False Light Agenda, which is on Amazon. And so somebody came into the comments and asked if there's a false light entity attached to a person, which is something that does happen. If there's a false light entity attached to a person, does that entity follow that person after they die? Do they follow that person through their future lifetimes? That is such a good question and an interesting question. So whoever posted that, thank you. So I'm going to broaden this a little bit though, because the answer is the same whether we're talking about any entity, any spiritual being. And the reality is that any spiritual being can attach to a person. A person can have multiple spirit attachments, entity attachments. But just for simplicity's sake, we're just going to assume that it's one. And also just touching on the fact that there are many different types of entities that can attach to a person and many reasons why they would want to attach to a living human being. But the question is, does that being follow that person after they leave this current incarnation? So in case you haven't gotten the memo yet from my new book and from all the stuff that I talk about on my channel here, in case you haven't gotten the false light memo, let me just really quickly define false light entity so we're all clear about what that is. So I use this term, false light entity, to refer to any negative spiritual being that is posing as a being of light, that is posing as a benevolent, positive being. And this is extremely common. I used to think it was just an issue with the New Age community channeling entities like aliens and ascended masters and stuff who actually were not who they say they were. They were actually dark beings. This is still really common in New Age, but it's not just in New Age. It's everywhere, which I talk about in my book, Revealing the False Light Agenda. But back to our question, does any type of entity, false light entity, just a straight out dark entity that's not even pretending, a discarnate human soul, like a straight out spirit attachment, a demon attached to a person, a jinn attached to a person, all the different types of situations that could be happening in the current in the person's current incarnation, when the person passes away, what happens to that entity? So the answer is interesting, and my answer is based on, as usual, working with many, many different cases. Okay, so this is not just some information that I channeled or whatever. This is like observation through working with many clients and working with cases where people have passed away. And then as a medium, I'm looking and seeing, well, what happened to the entity? What's happening with the person? What happened to the entity, etc. So based on all of this observation and experience, here's what I've seen. The entity can do a variety of different things. Okay, so the answer is not the same for every situation. If you're a note taker, then you might write this down. Number one, the entity might follow the person from lifetime to lifetime and keep reattaching every time they're in physical incarnation. Usually when they're in the afterlife, they're not going to be attached. So no matter what, they're usually not going to be attached. They're going to be hanging off to the side and just waiting until the person reincarnates again. So that's one scenario, is that the entity will hang out and wait and keep an eye on the soul and then reattach at the next incarnation, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And this is something that some of my clients have seen over the years with the people that I've worked with, that their current entity issue that they're dealing with, they've come to realize they've had this issue for multiple lifetimes. So then we go in and we start doing a lot of past life and Akashic Records work in order to clear the issue permanently so it doesn't try to reattach in the next lifetime or in some other way. So that's one scenario, is that the entity, false light entity or any type of entity, the entity may attempt to reattach again and again, future lifetimes. So that's number one scenario. Number two scenario is that the entity will detach upon the person's death, and then that entity will then immediately stay around the earth plane and find another person to attach to. This was actually something that I saw. I didn't point this out directly in a clear way, but it was kind of some information behind the scenes in my recent book, The Revealing the False Light Agenda. The story near the beginning of the book, I don't remember what chapter, but where the client had a jinn attached to her who she thought was her deceased spiritual teacher. The jinn was pretending to be her deceased spiritual teacher. But here's where it got interesting. The jinn had actually been attached to the spiritual teacher when she was alive. And then the spiritual teacher passed away. And then the jinn immediately attached to one of the teacher's students. And it pretended to be the teacher. Hopefully that's not too confusing. Jinn will really make your brain melt. I mean, the things that they do, they're making me, I'm feeling tongue-tied right now just because of how brain melting it is. Anyway, we're going to keep going. So that's the second scenario, is that the entity will immediately release from the original person and go on to someone else, usually in the vicinity. So like the example that I just gave, one of the person's students, or, someone else in the friend group or the family. Okay. So speaking of that, let's go on to number 3. Number 3 is kind of an offshoot of what I was just referring to. The entity will release from the person as they're passing away, and then will immediately attach to another family member. So then it's part of an ancestral issue. Then each time the next family member passes away, the entity then attaches to the next living person, whoever else is remaining in the family. Okay. So there we have an ancestral issue. So in example, number 1 on the list, we had past life issue or future lifetimes issue. Number 3, which we're on right now, then we're getting into ancestral issue. And then number 4 is actually the best case scenario. And this is when the entity releases and then it decides to leave the earth plane and not attach to anyone else. And this is something that I saw recently with someone's loved one passed away. That loved one had an entity attached to them when they passed away. Thank goodness that entity did not try to attach to anyone else. It actually left the earth dimension and is hanging out elsewhere. And so it did not try to reattach to the same person, and it's not going to. This is what I saw psychically, is that that person who passed away is not going to have a reattachment later. And I also checked that person's friends. That entity is not attached to the person's friends or loved ones. It's actually off in another dimension. And so it's basically it's really up to the situation and the entity and whatever the entity chooses to do. And it's kind of like the personality of the entity and what their intentions and goals are. And so it's all very interesting. So let me know if you have any questions about that. I personally find this super interesting. Like, just this information about what happens to the entity. Does it stay attached? Where does it go, etc. So if you have any follow-up questions on this, just let me know. And then I'll just close this out by saying, if you would like deeper support, I invite you to check out my website, psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. And on there, you can find 2 super important aspects of support. The first one is free. It is a free quiz. Are you under psychic attack? And you'll go through this quiz. You can go through this quiz in just a few minutes. It will help you determine all sorts of things. And a psychic attack can include someone sending black magic, negative emotional energy, or even that there's an entity attachment or dark forces interference in your life. And you can go through and answer all these questions and gain a better idea of what's going on with your situation and then what you might be able to do next to help resolve it. So that is free, and you'll find it on my website, psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. And the second resource is my paid academy, Spiritual Empowerment Academy. If you are dealing with an entity attachment or some other aspect of negative spiritual interference, and you don't want that entity to stay attached to you, you don't want to wait until you die, you want it to be cleared now, then you probably want some deeper support, mentoring, and guidance that I offer in my program. You can find information about that at my website. You just click on Work with Maya. As always, thank you so much, and I will see you next time.